ممكن تعرف حالك وممكن تسأل بالعربي. دكتور محمد أهلا.
محمد أبو كوش، أستاذ جامعي في جامعة القدس. I'll speak in English. Thank you for the very valuable lecture, but I want to go straight to the questions. With regard to the success of Germany, Germany made the success out of the capitalist system when it was West Germany. And also East Germany made a success out of the socialist system. And that is why although you have stressed the question of the employment and the question of the wages, I think that with regard to Germany, which you know better than I, there are other factors that contributed to the continued success of Germany as the leading economy in West Europe. I go also to the question of the wages with regard to Japan. I mean, poor Shinzo Abe, he tried all sorts of policies, but the people, they don't have the confidence. And that's why, despite the zero interest rate and even the negative interest rate, the people, they have no confidence. And that is why there is a problem with regard to the growth of the Japanese economy. And I'm talking about two leading countries. I'm not talking about, middle-class countries or let alone the third world. So I just want an explanation if you can help me. Thank you.
Can I answer?
You want to take them?
Yeah, I would like to take it one by one. Well, the first point on Germany is, these were both very good questions. Thank you for that. The first point on Germany, I must say, it is very difficult to identify if you, for example, compare Germany to France. If you compare Germany to France, it's very difficult to identify factors where Germany is more successful than France. In terms of productivity, Germany is definitely not more successful. France, even the absolute productivity in France today is higher than in Germany, per hour, calculated per hour. The development of productivity in France is as good as in Germany. The only difference you find is wages, is the wage constraint, the political wage constraint. And if you look at other indicators, it is very difficult to find something that is outstanding in Germany. Look at investment ratio, it's very bad. It's worse than in most developed countries. So there is no clear indication where the German strength would come from, except for the factors that I've mentioned. I know there is the vision, the idea that Germany is so extremely powerful and productive because its people are so hardworking and things like that, but it's not quite true. Sorry to say that. Then to Japan. Japan is an even better question. Thank you for that. That's very important. Because what happened in Japan I know the story very, very well because I was very close to many Japanese economists, colleagues I'm working with. The point is that for 20 years, the Japanese government did not understand what is going on. They were fighting everything and nothing, but they tackled wages. 20 years after the disaster began, Mr. Abe, you mentioned it rightly, Mr. Abe recognized explicitly that they had a wage problem. He explicitly mentioned it. He said it. You can quote him. He said, "Oh, now I learned we have a wage problem. Our wages are not rising enough." But even he did not succeed in bringing wages back to a normal development. And you see, this is because it is absolutely clear. If you have depressed wages, you have depressed productivity because you have depressed dynamics. How to get out of this? You cannot create simply the dynamics by the government. The government tried time and again. But the government alone is not strong enough to create the dynamics, and because the government always is, so to say, restricted by this taboo of not running too high deficits. So the government always tried, pushed a bit, and then went back, retreated from that. And that is why they never created the dynamics of the economy that would have convinced the company sector to increase wages more than was justified by this extremely weak productivity that they have. But the weak productivity is the symptom of the crisis. It is not something exogenous again. And to overcome this situation, even for someone who has understood what is going on, is extremely difficult, because the company sector will always lobby against rising wages, because they say, well, we do not have higher productivity, that they would get higher productivity if wages would rise more. That is very difficult to tell them and to push through.
Okay. Yusuf.
Two questions. According to your analysis, the Palestinian economic activity in the West Bank could never develop because we don't have a central bank, and therefore we can't create money, and we don't have a currency, and so therefore development cannot take place here. Is that correct to say?
No, not quite. You see, it depends very much. You have a dollarization, kind of dollarization or shekelization, or how should I call it?
We have three currencies.
You have
legal tender.
Yeah, but you have a currency financing transactions, which does not necessarily mean that this is preventing development. It depends on the conditions under which this money is floating and the conditions under which this money is issued, namely the interest rates. If due to the Israeli situation or whatever it is, or the global situation, you get into a situation where the interest rate is very low in your country, you can get this process going. The only problem is you do not have it in your hand. You cannot accelerate it from your side, and you cannot stop it from your side. But we have examples. I've studied examples. For example, Ecuador, which has a fully dollarized economy. The problem is not as such that there cannot be development, but the problem is the government doesn't have it in its hand. And so it's by chance that you have the possibility to grow, or you do not have it. And this is the pity, that you cannot plan, you cannot create your own strategy, but it's not a priori impossible.
So you can take advantage of it when the
circumstances are good, yeah.
We'll be ready to use it.
Well, that's when the Zionists will disappear.
Well, no, when low interest,
anyway, second question.
When shekel interest rate.
Yeah, okay, second question.
Second question. Given your assessment of neoclassical economics, and given that we teach neoclassical economics as the God-given truth in our universities, would you suggest that we look for other models or other theories in addition? I don't say throw it out, because you have to know the language of your oppressor or your enemy, etc. Would you suggest or recommend that we open our doors and our minds to heterodox economics, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do not say that you have to replace this one by the other. That would not be the solution, but to have both. You need heterodox approaches and you need orthodox approaches, and they should fight with one another. You should have a competition and a good discussion. That is the thing. You see, if you put it in academic terms, what is the difference between Europe and the United States? Is exactly that. Because in the United States you have a lot of heterodox economists. You have a lot of discussion ongoing. In Europe you have 99% orthodox economics. And we are not, the few others are not able to influence policies in a way that would be necessary. So that is what Europe is suffering from, a very orthodox, non-discursive discussion of economics. And that is why it is absolutely necessary in my view, to open this. Well, I do not say, look at France, and France is much much more open than Germany, but Germany in particular is extremely orthodox. And that is why it is not possible in Germany to communicate these things in a way that would be necessary to solve the European crisis. We are not able to solve the European crisis because Germany is sitting in its dogma of orthodoxy, of fiscal orthodoxy and of monetary orthodoxy without understanding what is going on. And if you look at the ECB has emancipated from that. My friend, I can say my friend Mario Draghi, he has absolutely learned the lesson, and today the person who is talking most about wages immediately after me, so to say, is Mario Draghi. He's talking all the time about wages, and he says wages in Germany are key to the solution of the European problem. So the weights are shifting, but what you absolutely need is an open discussion and no taboos in economics. That's the worst thing that can happen.
Even Krugman, I think, almost started talking about wages in Germany.
Also, yeah.
ريان تفضل وبعدين دكتور شحات.
Yeah.
Dr. Ryan Darwish from Palestinian Ministry of National Economy.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I have two questions, but I would like to ask in Arabic. It's more easy for me.
You speak native? Okay.
أريد أن أسأل بخصوص مشروع مارشال. Okay, please.
Sorry.
I would like to ask in Arabic.
Yeah.
أريد أن أسأل حقيقة كيف لمشروع مارشال بنى الاقتصاد الألماني. يعني مشروع مارشال كان لأوروبا، لكن كيف تقنيا ساهم في بناء الاقتصاد الألماني وانتقالها للتميز، أصبحت distinguished يعني economy. فهاي يعني سؤال في المجال التقني. كلنا قرأنا عن مشروع مارشال، لكن تقنيا أرجو أن تجيب على هذا السؤال. السؤال الثاني بالنسبة لليابان. اليابان مرت فترات كانت تشتكي من كثر الفائض المالي لديها بسبب الإفراط الزائد في الادخار، ولكن يعني في هذه النقطة تحديدا وجدنا أنه في دور شديد جدا للدولة، ولكن كيف أقنعت الدولة الأفراد بالتخفيف من هذا السيف؟ يعني لأنه صار إفراط زائد ولدرجة أن أصبحت اليابان تبحث عن مقترضين لديها. شكرا جزيلا. شكرا. And thank you for your distinguished lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm trying to answer the question in the row you put them. Well, the Marshall Plan, in my view, is exaggerated in its effect on the German economy in the 50s. It's very much exaggerated, you know. I think it was much less important than most people think. Because what happened was Germany had extremely good conditions to grow and to prosper in the 50s and the 60s. The one was its currency was dramatically undervalued. It was undervalued. The D-Mark was undervalued against the dollar. The second was it had extremely low interest rates, not due to Germany, but due to the Fed in the US, because in Bretton Woods, the Fed determined the interest rates for the whole world. So the Fed had extremely expansionary policies in the 50s and 60s, which are totally forgotten very often. That is very important. And the third was that German wages, due to strong unions after the war, were able to, from the very beginning, from the very first year on, to grow in line and very strongly in line with productivity. So we had a catching up in productivity, and German wages followed immediately. We had in the 50s, throughout the 50s, every year a real wage increase of 7–8%. And in the 60s, then 5–6%. So this wage dynamic is extremely important to understand the German positive, the success of Germany. But coming to if you compare the German performance in these years with the performance of other European countries, you see the German performance was not extraordinary. Italy, for example, had overall over the 20 years higher growth rates than Germany. France was very close to Germany, although they did not have the same kind of Marshall Plan like Germany had. So I think the Marshall Plan is exaggerated, because when I don't have the 50s here, but in the 50s you would see the German government all the time ran a huge surplus in the 50s. The government ran a surplus which matched, so to say, the deficit or the additional expenditure that came from the Marshall Plan. So if you would put it overall, I think it's not a big fiscal stimulus that we had in this time. Your second question, Japan, what did you? The surplus. Well, the current account surplus, you mean?
The traditional, the historical.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And high savings.
Yeah, the point is, I have to correct you a bit. In my view, it is not correct to say Japan had a high surplus because it has high savings, because this is an identity, that is not an explanation. High savings are identically used for surplus, current account surplus of a country. It's a mistake that many people make, even including Paul Krugman, Joe Stiglitz, and some other. But it's a mistake. The high savings are not explaining the current account surplus. The current account surplus is explained, as in the German case, by high competitiveness of Japan in the years when its catching up was successful, and of some undervaluation that it had for quite some time, as in the case of China in the first years of its opening of the market. So. And you see the fact that the Japanese surplus has disappeared, despite high savings. They still have high savings, but the surplus is gone, because it has to be matched by a high government deficit, shows that the savings as such are not, cannot be the explanation of the surplus. That's just an identity. You should not use this identity, high savings, a country with high savings has a current account surplus. It's the same thing. It's not an explanation. It's the same thing said in different words. But that is worth another lecture next time.
Thank you, Professor Flaspet.
Yeah.
And I really have no question.
Very good.
Simply,
I saw you nodding all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. but